Welcome back to Historic Tahlequah. Patsy Ann Smith, Dr. Leoser's great-great-granddaughter, is going to talk about this cabin. What was its size at the time of the Civil War, Patsy Ann?
I understand it was a 5-room log cabin and that they raised their 7 children in.
All right.
And part of it was torn down to build what I refer to as the big house, the 2-story house that was built in 1907.
All righty. And Dr. Leoser's granddaughter, Sue Crafton, who was a friend of mine, Mary, his daughter Mary Crafton's, said that it was built in an L shape. Okay. And that during the Civil War, or at the end of the Civil War, when everything had been devastated here, that families would come back, and Dr. Leoser and his wife Susan would let families move in with them until they could find shelter. And you told me an interesting story about some of the furniture during the Civil War, when groups of thugs would go around and try to tear up everything and steal everything. Tell that story.
I still have the clock that they used to hide out in the woods so that someone wouldn't come in and steal it. Now, I'm sure there were other things, but the clock is the one I've grown up hearing about.
All right. But yes, I'm sure they had other things too. Lots of families did that to keep thugs or raiders from stealing their stuff.
Stealing everything.
But Dr. Leoser was never harmed during the Civil War.
No, he was. I do have a letter that says he was taken by both sides, the North, the South, to doctor their people, but that they would always bring him back so that he could administer being a physician here for the town.
Right. And you have his, now talk about these.
I have his old saddlebags from long ago, and they still, they have some of the instruments that he had in there. They're getting very brittle. I probably ought to. Which will have the little bottles
of
medicines in them, and then they will have the little instruments. Actually, here's a little card that Aunt Sue had. This medicine bag was used by Dr. I.D. Leoser in caring for students of the male and female seminaries. Dr. Leoser was the father of Mrs. Crafton and Miss Callie Leoser. And then here's some of these little instruments. Once again, this is all kind of falling apart. The leather is kind of gone.
Oh, yes, the lancets that to lance wounds. And, of course, the seminaries were organized before the Civil War in 1851, so he occupied that position both before and after the Civil War. They were closed down during the Civil War. Here are his, there's a lancet in here.
These are just little bottles of
now explain about saddlebags. The modern person won't know about saddlebags. How were they, when you say saddlebags, what does that mean? Tell what that means.
They were carried on the back of the horse so that he would have room to carry his instruments and things with him when he would go out to visit people out in the country.
And they were divided so they spread across the back of the horse.
And I believe you told me this has J. Nash on it, and I believe weren't they, what were they? It still has Cherokee Nation on it.
A very prominent official in the Cherokee Nation. The Nash family is still well known.
Still well known.
Now tell a story about Jesse James.
The way I understand it is when Jesse and his brother were going through, then they kicked the family out so that they could rest nicely in the cabin. They didn't harm the family. They didn't rob them. They just said, leave, and we'll take over the cabin and the heat or the cool of it and move on from there. So.
And Jesse James was sort of revered by people in this area as a late-day Robin Hood, just as Robin Hood in the old England was revered, because they considered him sort of a folk hero. Not everybody, but some people considered him as a folk hero. Now, Dr. Leoser lived through the Civil War and was practicing physician as well as with the seminaries, and he lived until 1877.
Yes.
And is it not true, Patsy Ann, that at one time the family cemetery was over here?
It definitely was.
And
before, whenever the city created their cemetery out here, then they asked any of the town, and my family, the way I understand them, were very much into Tahlequah. So if the town council wanted them to move that way, then they dug up the bodies and moved that way.
And the first cemetery in Tahlequah was on the site of the present Sequoia Elementary School, but that cemetery was moved in 1905 out to the city cemetery, which was actually opened in 1888. So you don't know the exact year when the family were
No,
moved.
I do not.
But that's a wonderful lot out in the city cemetery today. And to your knowledge, they remained here until they went out on the hill to the present cemetery.
Yes.
But many people were buried on the site of Old Sequoia Elementary School. Well, we're going to have to take another break, but we'll be right back, so don't go away.